Peace, world. It's Timbo from Info Minds. Now, we got a special episode for you guys today. We're going to try to educate the people a little bit today. So we have someone going to be able to break down a lot of the stuff that's been going on in the past couple weeks in the hip-hop industry and the entertainment world. Now, Mr. Hill, can you introduce yourself to the people and give us a little background about yourself?
My name is Hilton Napoleon. I'm an attorney in Miami, Florida. I've been practicing for 15 years. I specialize in criminal law and civil rights violations, both in federal and state court.
Now, on December 1st, the FBI's New York office tweeted a picture of Casanova, whose legal name is Coswell Sr. Now, Casanova was among 18 alleged members of the untouchable Guerrilla Stone Nation gang who are indicted on a range of criminal charges. Now, 2 days after the FBI's tweet, Casanova surrendered to law enforcement. Can you tell us, what is a RICO charge?
A RICO charge is where the federal government usually uses kind of like a cheat code to prosecute people who they believed are involved in organized crime. It's kind of like a catch-all, so to speak, to make it easier for the federal government to prosecute people who they might not necessarily catch in the act of committing a crime, but they believe that a person was involved in an organization that was involved in crimes. I mean, for long story short, it's what they usually charge to catch narcotics traffickers or mob bosses and things like that, or any other type of criminal organization.
Can you tell us what had they charged Cass with?
Casanova was basically charged with possession of a firearm and furtherance of drug trafficking, and he was also charged with drug trafficking. Simple possession of a firearm and furtherance of drug trafficking carries a minimum mandatory penalty of 5 years in prison. Even more importantly, that 5 years that he would have to serve is run consecutive to the underlying RICO charge. So what it basically means is, on top of whatever he gets on the RICO, he would also have to serve an additional 5 years after that if he were to go to trial and be found guilty by a jury.
Do you know if these alleged crimes that Cass is being charged with were committed recently, or do they date back for many years?
I had a chance to look at the indictment, and it appears that at least some of the crimes that some of the people involved in the RICO were committed back in 2010, and it spanned several years. As far as his particular charges, it's hard to tell because they just gave a date range. I know that one of the most recent homicides that they're charging one of the individuals involved in the conspiracy happened in 2020.
Worst case scenario, how much time could Cass potentially receive?
The maximum penalty for a conspiracy RICO charge is 20 years in prison. The likely penalty, to be honest with you, it's hard to say that right now.
Now, there are 17 other individuals named on the indictment. Are they all facing the same charges?
All of the individuals in the indictment are charged with RICO conspiracy, which means that they're charged with an offense that could carry up to 20 years in prison. However, some individuals involved in the conspiracy are charged with additional counts of homicide, additional counts of drug trafficking, additional counts of armed robbery. So no, everybody's not facing the exact charges except for the RICO.
Now, from the little bit of research that you were able to do you know if any of the defendants on the indictment is being accused of being the leader of the untouchable Guerrilla Stone Nation?
Generally speaking, the people who are higher up on the indictment are the ones that the feds believe are higher up in the organization. But what I mean specifically is that the indictment is numbered based on each defendant. So for example, it'll be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 18 in this particular case. People who are higher up in the organization end up closer to the top of the indictment as opposed to the bottom of the indictment.
Now, in your experience, do you think that the federal government will offer the 18 defendants a plea deal? And can you explain what a plea deal is?
In federal court, there's something more akin to what we call charge bargaining. So in federal court, the prosecutor usually doesn't offer a person 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, or anything remotely close to that. They'll offer a person to plead to a particular charge, and in exchange to pleading to that particular charge, they will drop all the other charges against them, and then they are later sentenced by what the judge determines what's appropriate. In Cass's case, he's charged with RICO conspiracy, and he's also charged with possession of a firearm and furtherance of a drug trafficking offense. The RICO conspiracy is a crime in and of itself, and possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking offense is a crime in and of itself. So what happens sometimes is that the government will offer him to plead guilty to the RICO conspiracy case, and in exchange for pleading guilty, they will drop the possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking offense, because the possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking offense carries a 5-year minimum mandatory penalty in and of itself.
Could a plea deal involve cooperation and assisting them in other cases? Because I read plea bargaining doesn't always have to include cooperation, though it often does in the federal system.
Generally speaking, what a prosecutor will tell you is that there are two types of people who are in federal custody: those who cooperated with the government and those who wish they cooperated with the government. So in a lot of federal cases, a lot of people try to cooperate with the government. So yes, many times a plea deal will involve cooperation.
If someone does cooperate, is there any way for the public to find out, or can they have their deal sealed?
It depends. If the government needs the cooperating witness to prove the crime against a particular defendant at trial, and they have to call that person to the stand, then yes, they would have to disclose who the cooperating witness is. However, if the government can establish the crime against the defendant without disclosing the cooperating witness, then sometimes they won't. It's a case-by-case basis.
If a defendant refuses a deal, are they opting to go to trial?
In a lot of cases, if a person refuses a plea deal from the government, then that means that they're going to go to trial. However, a defendant can plead guilty straight up to the court and just ask the court to sentence them without a plea deal from the prosecutor, which means that they're going to plead guilty to all the charges and then just let the judge sentence them. That usually only happens when a person has one charge against them in the entire indictment.
What is the risk and penalty of going to trial? And what are the pros and cons involved?
This is the unfortunate situation about our criminal justice system. And even though the judges are not supposed to do this, when a person goes to trial, many times the judge will sentence them higher than what they would have if they would have taken a plea deal. It's not supposed to be like that, but it is like that. As far as the pros are concerned of going to trial, obviously, if you win, you walk away, as opposed to having a criminal history on your record.
How often do defendants go to trial and beat the case? What's the success rate?
Most cases in federal court do not go to trial. As Jadakiss once famously said, when the feds come and get you, that's that. Before they even arrest you, they have a mountain of evidence against you. They will investigate an organization for years, put them up on a chair, let them hang themselves, and then kick the chair from underneath them 2 years, 3 years, 4 years later. So most criminal cases in federal court do not go to trial, because federal government, before they even do that, they will have you on camera, they will have recorded telephone calls, they will have confidential informants testifying against you, and you look at that mountain of evidence and most people just get scared.
Now, there's been a lot of talk online recently with people saying that Casanova's interview with DJ Vlad helped get him indicted. Now, how realistic is this? Could an interview on a social media platform really have led to an indictment?
I won't say that an interview led to an indictment, but I can tell you that an interview or social media will contribute to getting you indicted. In Casanova's indictment, it says members of the enterprise promoted and celebrated in music and on social media acts involving violence, the use of firearms, and narcotics distribution. So the federal government looks at your social media. What you post will later come back and bite you in the butt. I have had several cases where people post themselves holding a firearm, even though they're a convicted felon. They'll post pictures of money. They'll post pictures of drugs, expensive cars. They use all of that against you. So yes, social media is one of the main contributing factors, especially today for fraud crimes that they use against defendants in federal cases.
Now, as of lately in New York City, the federal government has been really cracking down. There's been several raids and several indictments of different organizations in the New York City area. The reason I'm asking you this question is this case similar to the Treyway case? Does it have any similarities or parallels?
I think is very similar to the Treadway case. That charge or that indictment also included racketeering or RICO charges, weapons possession, conspiracy to commit murder, narcotics possession. So yes, I think that this current case with Cass is very similar to the Treadway case. I see it following the same path to a certain extent as far as the way that they're going to try to prosecute it.
Now, Mr. Hill, I just asked you about the parallels and similarities of the Treadway case and the Gorilla Stone Nation case. Now, speaking of the Treadway case, the rapper Jim Jones and Mel Murder, they were heard on the wiretap. Mel Murder was arrested and named on the indictment. Jim Jones was never arrested or named on the indictment. I don't want to specifically talk about Jim Jones. From your experience, can someone provide information or cooperate and assist the feds with the case and not be outed as an informant?
I want to make clear in the way that the question is phrased that I am not talking about Jim Jones. I have no clue as to anything regarding that nature. In a general sense, however, yes, a person can cooperate with the government without being named in an indictment or without being disclosed to the other side. So yes, that can happen. And yes, that does happen all the time.
Can you tell the people what is a Rule 35 and a 5K1, and in what situations do they apply?
A Rule 35 is used for people who are sitting in prison and giving information to the government about other individuals who are facing trial. That's the traditional way that a Rule 35 is used. A 5K1 is used and disclosed by the government at the time that a defendant is being sentenced to let the judge know that a defendant cooperated with the government and had useful information that usually led to the prosecution of other individuals or caused people who have already been prosecuted to plead guilty.
I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank Joe B for connecting us. You know, coming from the inner city, in the neighborhoods, a person that goes to school and does the right thing, we call them square, we call them lame, we call them corny. You know, we glamorize criminality. What would you tell a 15, 16, 17-year-old that's thinking about getting involved with the street life?
You know, it's interesting because, like you said, I understand that dilemma. I wasn't always a lawyer who lived in Miami. I grew up in Detroit in the 1980s. I didn't look any different, talk any different, dress any different than anybody else who grew up in Detroit that time. I was just blessed enough where my parents always taught me not to care about what other people think. I played ball, so it was a little bit different. But I understand the struggle, because at the end of the day, when you come from a certain environment and that's what you see people do, you become a product of that, whether you want to be or not. It takes a really, really strong person to turn your back and not care about what other people think. When you are in the moment and you're sitting behind those jail cells, I have had so many people tell me that they're sick of it, they're done with it, it's not worth it. There are so many other avenues, especially now with social media, for people to have a platform for themselves and different ways of making money. You know, I tell people all the time, make your own future. Don't let somebody else make it for you.
If someone happens to find themselves in a legal bind here in the South Florida area, where can they reach out to you?
If they just Google my name, Hilton Napoleon, attorney, it should pop up. The name of our firm is Rascal Clock, Perez and Nieto. We're in Coral Gables. My telephone number is 305-476-7100. Anybody can reach me at any time. Anything comes up, I'm more than willing to either assist you or put you in the right direction.